सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
From his table inside the lavish red enamel interiors of 181 Avenue Foch, surrounded by people playing mahjong, pai gao and cards, waiters scurrying about with complimentary wine and opium, Detective Squad Chief Huang Big Shot Jin Rong looked out at one of the greatest criminal empires the world had ever known. The Big Eight mob controlled the opium business, gambling, prostitution, the fish market, at least 2 major banks, and the police itself. 3 of every 100 Shanghai residents made their living from crime. To keep the flotsam of drunks, small-time thieves and sex workers from spilling into the city's casinos, the Shanghai Municipal Police, or SMP, had hired a small army of men from another world. Men with long beards, bright red turbans. Yes, 6 brought in from small villages in Punjab's Majha. For the most part, the 558 men serving in what was known as the SMP Sikh branch disappeared from history when it was disbanded 80 years ago in 1943. From the surviving records, though, we know Constable Isar Singh was out on the violent street of Hongkou night after night. The historian Isabella Jackson tells us Isar arrested a drunk American soldier on December 16, 1906 and locked up an unruly Russian who obstructed traffic on Boone Road the next year. The Sikh constabulary was also key to putting down riots and political disturbances, leaving behind, though, a legacy of resentment that still colors popular culture in China and how Chinese see Indians. Few great cities have had a social fabric as closely entwined with organized crime as Shanghai. Through wars fought in the 19th century, scholar Julia Lovell writes, the colonial powers prized open China to opium, which was grown in India. In 1839, a desperate China confiscated some 1,000 tons of opium from British dealers in Guangzhou. London responded by demanding that the Chinese emperor compensate the traders for the street value of their drugs. The emperor, concerned about addiction in his kingdom, refused, leading Britain to unleash its warships against China and bombard its coastal towns. Shanghai was divided eventually into foreign-controlled enclaves. Like all criminalized polities, though, Shanghai proved pretty hard to control. Chinese police supplemented their income by running their own gambling houses, brothels, and opium dens. Taking bribes was commonplace. To make things worse, local constables were unable or unwilling to aggressively coerce the local population. Even as the colonial authorities struggled, criminal cartels enforced their authority ruthlessly. The Green Gang, one of the constituents of the Big Eight mob, was infamous for dealing with bothersome rivals by severing every visible artery of their victims with a fruit knife and leaving them to bleed to death, records scholar Peng Wang. The Big Eight even institutionalized a code of punishments with sentences ranging from 3 stabs in the lower leg to 9 cuts in the thigh. The reticence of local police to act against local criminals was, however, familiar to imperial authorities. The early London police commissioners Richard Mayne and Charles Rowan, criminologist Clive Emsley has noted, came to rely on rural recruits for their metropolitan city, realizing the local police were too enmeshed with the community to be properly coercive. From late in the 19th century, Jackson records, Indians began to be deployed in police roles across the empire, from Uganda and Mauritius to Fiji and Malaya. Hong Kong Sikh police and I quote, acquired a reputation among the British officers for their loyalty and martial prowess in service to the empire. The example led Shanghai to also seek out Sikh recruits from Majha, for whom it set up a training school in 1896, which is kind of where the strange kung fu story comes in. Lieutenant Colonel William Ewart Fairbairn, a Royal Navy Marine who had learned martial arts while stationed in Korea, and is famous for designing a knife, by the way, which is still used by commandos, turned the SMP into a formidable force. His innovations, expert Leroy Thompson has recorded, included the Red Maria, a scarlet-coloured armoured car equipped with machine guns, tear gas canisters, grenade launchers and electric searchlights. The car, which carried up to 50 specially trained personnel, allowed the police to confront Shanghai's increasingly well-equipped criminals. The Red Maria was involved, among other things, in a 19-hour gunfight against armed kidnappers which saw over 700 rounds fired. Fairbairn, who went on to found a martial arts technique he called gutter fighting based on Kung Fu, also developed the SMP-6 into a disciplined riot control force. Many received Kung Fu-inspired training, and 2 lines of 12 lathi-carrying Sikhs would follow Chinese police who were given short European-style batons to break up labour disputes and riots. The Sikhs played a key role in an anti-gambling crackdown in 1929, targeting illegal establishments which were often operated by ethnic Chinese police. The essence of Fairbairn's teachings to his Sikhs is evident from the blurb of his book. With your bare hands, you can beat the man who wants to kill you. In one internal report, the SMC noted that the Chinese rickshaw pullers feared the Sikhs. I quote, years of experience have proved that these men obey police signals not so much from any respect for the law as from the fear of consequences to themselves if they do not. The traffic baton serves as an outward emblem of the physical force behind the law. The role of the Sikh police in combating civil disorder, though, embittered the population, and they became a symbol of colonial authority. The writer Cao Juren, arriving in Shanghai in the first decades of the last century, noted the presence of, I quote, Sikh policemen whose faces were black and who wore red turbans. Stories of sexual violence by Sikhs against local women, true or otherwise, proliferated in pop culture. I know them, one Shanghai resident told scholar Cao Yin of the Sikhs. They were slaves of the British. Indians were not good to us. As a result of those colonial era encounters, Yin observes, and I quote, many Chinese nowadays hold certain distorted and imaginary grudges against Indians. Less known to the Chinese, the Sikh constabulary were also playing a key role in colonial surveillance of suspected Indian nationalists in Shanghai, infiltrating, among other things, a local Gurdwara in search of dissidents. The fragmentary evidence we have of Isar Singh's story suggests it did not have a happy ending. In April 1911, he was arrested on charges of drunken disorderly behavior after assaulting a Chinese man on the Sichuan Road. The policeman himself was sentenced to a fine of $10 and 7 days of hard labor. It's unclear if he was reinstated in the police force or packed off home. Following the fall of Shanghai to Japanese forces in 1937, the SMP fell apart. Some of the 500-odd Sikh personnel on its roll served as prison guards for the Imperial Japanese Army, with at least 2 receiving war crime sentences after the end of the Second World War. Some personnel also seem to have ended up in the Indian National Army, while most returned to India or found jobs elsewhere in East Asia. The last remaining Sikhs of the SMP were repatriated home in 1945. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm National Security Editor of The Print. Thank you again for watching Security Code.